Why are the FNaF 1 animatronics and the Withered animatronics so different from one another? Welcome back to another FNaF theory, and today, I got a new recording room. And hey, maybe since the room looks different, I should also freshen up a little bit. Now we've got a lot of stuff to cover today, so let's get right into it. So, in FNaF 2, the Withered animatronics were kept around for spare parts for the toy animatronics. At the end of FNaF 2, we see a newspaper clipping that says the toy animatronics are getting scrapped, and the Withered animatronics are getting kept in case the company wants to reopen in a few years on a smaller budget. But the one thing that's bothered me for years about this topic is why the two sets of animatronics look completely different from one another. I mean, let's take Chica for example. The Withered version of her looks completely different from the FNaF 1 model. And I know somebody's going to bring this up in the comments, and it can't just be a different casing on the animatronics. Yeah, this could be the reason for the different number of toes between the two animatronics, but that doesn't explain the different hinged jaws between the two. And it feels especially weird that we haven't seen the Withereds in a while, considering we've got Help Wanted 1 and Security Breach recently that both go over Fazbear Entertainment's history. Sure, Help Wanted 1 has the Withereds now, but on release, the Withereds were nowhere to be found. Even during one of the endings where you could find Glitchtrap, you could see a faceless Bonnie, but it's the FNaF 1 Bonnie just without the faceplate. And in Security Breach, we have Rockstar Row, which is just a museum of old animatronic parts from Fazbear's past, like the toy animatronics and the FNaF 1 animatronics, but nothing from the Withereds. And it's not like the missing Withered pieces are just in the blob or something. The blob might be stealing pieces of old animatronics, but none of them are from the Withereds. Now, a lot of people are probably going to say something along the lines of, well, it was just a design choice by Schlatt at the time, and after FNaF 2, he retconned the design back to the FNaF 1 designs. And to that I say, Schlatt really doesn't like doing retcons. He stated before FNaF 6 that he did one retcon to the story, and I highly doubt it was the designs of the animatronics. So all of that must mean that these animatronics did exist, but something happened to them so that they don't make it to Security Breach. So what could that be? Well, I have two possible places of where these animatronics might have ended up, and they both can work together. Let's start with the more obvious one. Follow me. We can obviously see William Afton disassembling these animatronics to presumably take the animatronic components and melt them down in order to make the Funtime animatronics. Now I say it has to be the Withered animatronics because of their designs. Yes, the layout of the building is very similar to the FNaF 1 building, but the designs of the sprites are much closer to what the Withereds look like, with the buttons on the chest. The second place I think the Withered animatronics might have went is FNaF 4. Take a quick look at Withered Bonnie. Now take a look at Nightmare Bonnie. See any similarities between the two? The damage on Bonnie's right hand and left foot is exactly the same on both animatronics. This leads me to believe that William might have used the Withered animatronics during the FNaF 4 experiments. And Bonnie's not the only one with these similarities. Both Chicas have the same jaw mechanisms, both Foxies have their torsos and legs separated from one another, and Freddy, well, it's just Freddy. How exactly can these two theories work together? They're completely conflicting ideas. Let me show you real quick. Now initially, I just wanted to use the animatronic designs that we see in the games in order to figure out where to put FNaF 4 on this timeline. Because Withered Bonnie is missing his face, but Nightmare Bonnie isn't, I was initially deciding to put FNaF 4 right here between 1985 and 1987. This was going off the assumption that the animatronics were taking more damage while they were in the experiments. But after considering some of the books, I think FNaF 4 now needs to be moved to after 1987. Now, what would make me think that the FNaF 4 experiments take place after FNaF 2? Well, in one of the stories we see Rory, one of the kids in the experiments, has been locked in the experiment for 10 years. And obviously, 1985 to 1987 is only 2 years, which means that if Rory actually exists, or kids like him, it needs to take place after 1987, the time period where I also think Springtrap gets Springtrapped. This then means that Follow Me also takes place after 1987. Why? Well, you see, this is where things get a little confusing. William only needs the animatronic components from the Withers in order to melt them down and turn them into the fun times. But he can then use the casings from the same animatronics in order to make the nightmare animatronics for the experiments. You see, this isn't a split in the timeline. This is just me showing where the different animatronic components go after the events that follow me. The animatronic goes to circus babies in order to be melted down and turned into the fun times, while the casing goes to the FNaF 4 location in order to be turned into the nightmare animatronics, so William can siphon more agony off of kids in the experiments. This also explains why William is trying to create child kidnapping robots in the first place. He creates the animatronics for circus babies and then sends the kids to the FNaF 4 location to siphon more agony off of them. Now hang on a second. If the casing went to FNaF 4 and the animatronic went to circus babies, what goes to FNaF 1? You see, in order to get that answer, we have to look at another FNaF story that looks at the origins of the Mimic. You see, in the story where we learn about the Mimic's origins, we figure out that it's actually made way early on in the timeline, like the beginning of Fazbear Entertainment, which to me makes absolutely no sense. How did the Mimic get made here? It's so advanced. Oh my god. Anyway, now in the book, we find out that the Mimic is made in the 70s. And in other stories, we find out that the Mimic is causing havoc, but in the games, it's kind of odd to not see it at all throughout this entire timeline until Security Breach. But I think Fazbear had the Mimic in their back pocket and was trying to use it sparingly. And one of those instances is FNaF 1. Now what made me think that the FNaF 1 animatronics could be running off of the Mimic program in the first place is what Phone Guy says about the animatronics. He says that they're programmed to put any endoskeletons inside a suit at the end of the night. And they sometimes mistaken you for an endo. This to me sounds a lot like the guy in the books who programs the Mimic to disassemble the animatronics for him, and the Mimic takes it a little too far by disassembling the people. And if Fazbear's working with a smaller budget with the FNaF 1 building, it makes sense for them to pull the Mimic program out and use that on the animatronics. Fazbear's been sitting on the Mimic for about 20 years now, so it would make sense for them to try and finally use it in a situation where they're kind of desperate to. We already know that Fazbear scrapped all their toy animatronics back in '87, and if William stole the Withered animatronics for his experiments, it would make sense for Fazbear to try and build new animatronics as quickly as possible, program them with the Mimic program, and make them watch the security footage that they've been building up for years on the older animatronics. Now, I can already hear people in the comments saying how the FNaF 1 animatronics are haunted and can't be running off of the Mimic program. And sure, they could be haunted, or they could be running off of the Mimic program that was trained off of the Withered animatronics that are in fact haunted, so they gain the characteristics of being haunted without actually being haunted. After all, we do hear that the FNaF 2 animatronics have a problem with staring at adults. They're completely fine with the kids though, and we never hear about this with the FNaF 1 animatronics, which could mean that they weren't taught to do this. Now that we've got all of our pieces laid out, let's pop our mixture into the oven and... Sorry, wrong channel. Let's recap what we've went over today. William's plan to get the Freddy's building closed worked like a charm. After all, he wasn't going to be able to tamper with the animatronics as much as he wanted with all those prying eyes around the building. Fazbear had already scrapped all the toy animatronics, and the Withereds had already gotten moved to the old FNaF 1 building, so William had to work fast because he wasn't going to get an opportunity like this again. Over the course of the next few days, William then lures all 4 animatronics back to the safe room. He then disassembles and deactivates all 4 of them and then moves on with the next step of his plan. William at this point understands that the remnant is stored in the metal of the animatronics and decides to take the endoskeletons in order to melt them down and use that in the new fun timeline that he's making. Meanwhile, he wants to use the casings in a new experiment in order to extract more remnant from kids. He only wants the casings and not the full animatronic because he doesn't want any of the old remnant interfering with the experiments that he's going to be conducting. William sets up Circus Babies Rentals and the FNaF 4 experiments so they can both run without his input. Meanwhile, he heads back to the FNaF 1 location in order to discover the burglary that happened at his building. What William wasn't expecting is for some parts of the spirits to still linger behind in the building without the animatronics. At this point, we know what happens to William here. Fazbear Entertainment then moves forward with reopening the FNaF 1 building all on their own. They discover the supposed burglary and decide to remake the old animatronics. They then decide that they might be able to save some money if they use the old Mimic program that they've been holding onto for a few years and implement that into the animatronics. This theory has a lot of moving parts to it, so I want to hear what you guys think with a comment down below. Because there's a lot of stuff going on, it might not all be correct, but I think it's a good starting point for my timeline that I want to build. Honestly, I'm hearing a lot of other content creators saying that they want to get their timelines out here soon, and I kind of want to join in the fun. And with that, I'm going to leave this video here. I'm pretty excited to work on some stuff in the future for you guys, and I hope you guys are excited too. Thanks again for all the support you guys have been showing me recently. It really means a lot to me, and it shows me just how much you guys enjoy my content. So it makes me want to put out even more for you guys. Click over here if you're interested in seeing more of my content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye!